The wolfhound came off the stable wall like something loosed from a snare, all grey muscle and open jaw, and the whole yard scattered before him. A groom went down in the straw. A footman dropped a pail that rang against the cobbles and rolled. Someone was shouting for a musket, shouting that the beast had gone wild again, that no one living could tame the Duke's wolfhound, and it was madness to keep trying. And through the dust and the panic, a girl new to the house that very morning stood absolutely still by the mounting block and did not run. Her name was Nell Cartwright, and she had been at Wolvercote 3 hours. She watched the dog the way she watched everything, quietly, from the edge, with her hands folded and her chin down so no one would trouble to look back at her. He was enormous. Taller at the shoulder than a foal, rough coated the colour of iron and ash, and thin under all that size, thin in a way that had nothing to do with feeding. He wheeled at the centre of the yard, with his hackles standing in a ridge down his spine, and his eyes rolling white at the corners, and every man who came near him fell back. Get a rope on him. The head groom bellowed. He had a coil in his fist, and would not go closer than the trough. Corner him against the tack room, quick now. Thomas, the far side. I'll not, said Thomas, and meant it. Nell smelled the yard around her, warm dung and split straw, the iron tang of the trough water gone green in the July heat, saddle leather, and under it all the sharp dry smell of the dog himself, which was the smell of an animal that had not slept properly in a long while. A wasp bumbled at the honeysuckle, climbing the wall. The sun lay flat and heavy on the cobbles. It was the hottest hour of the hottest afternoon she could remember, and the whole world seemed to be holding still except this one great frightened creature, turning and turning in the middle of it. He's not wild, she said, not loudly. She had a low voice and she did not raise it. The head groom did not hear her. But a boy beside her did, a scullery lad with soot on his knuckles, and he goggled at her. You say what, miss? He's not wild. She kept her eyes on the dog. He's waiting for someone. The boy laughed, a scared little bark of a laugh, and then the dog swung his massive head toward the sound, and everyone froze again, and no one laughed after that. They drove him at last into the angle between the tack room and the water butt, 3 men with a hurdle and a rope, and he stood there heaving with his sides going like a bellows, and his lips peeled back off teeth as long as her thumb. He was not going to bite from wickedness. Nell knew that the way she knew the weather was turning. He was going to bite from terror, which was worse, because terror had no bottom to it, and would not stop when it should. She had seen it before, in another yard, in another life she did not speak of. Well? A new voice, hard and clipped, from the archway behind them. Have you cornered him, then? Is that your notion of managing the animal? 3 of you and a hurdle, driving him mad in the heat. Every servant in the yard turned and dipped at once, like a field of barley in a gust. The man in the archway was slender and beautifully dressed for the country, in a coat of dark bottle green with dust on his boots, and he had the sort of cold, handsome face that looked as though it had been cut rather than born. This was not the Duke. Nell would learn his name within the hour. Miss Vane, the steward, who ran Wolvercote as a clockmaker, runs a clock, and who had already decided, that morning, over his coffee, that the wolfhound was a thing to be got rid of. He cannot be managed, your Grace's wishes notwithstanding, Vane said to the head groom, drawing off one riding glove finger by finger. You have seen it yourself. He has laid open the kennel man's arm. He goes for the horses. I will send to the village tonight, and have it done cleanly and quietly before the guests arrive, and His Grace need never watch. His Grace, said another voice, will watch whatever he pleases in his own yard. And that one Nell did not need to be told. He came through the archway on foot, hatless, in his shirt sleeves with the cuffs turned back off his forearms, and the whole quality of the afternoon changed around him. Gabriel Thorne, Duke of Wolvercote, was a big man made bigger by stillness, broad through the shoulder, the linen of his shirt pulled taut when he moved, his forearms brown, and corded from work no duke was supposed to do. His dark hair was damp at the temples. He looked as though he had been out since before dawn and had not stopped, and there was about his mouth the particular tiredness of a man who has been holding something heavy for a very long time and cannot set it down. He crossed the yard without hurry, and the dog's ears came half up, and then went flat again. "Bran," the Duke said. The hound flinched at the name. "Bran, steady, now." Gabriel stopped an arm's length off and crouched, slow, one knee to the cobbles, and held out the flat of his hand. His voice had gone gentle in a way that seemed to cost him. "It is only me. You know me. Come to me now. There's a good lad. Come." For one breath it seemed the dog might. His great head lowered. A tremor ran the length of him. Then, Vane, behind them, snapped his glove against his palm. A small sharp crack, no more, and the hound came apart. He lunged, not at the Duke but past him, blind, at the gap where the men had loosened, and the hurdle went over, and the rope man was flung against the water butt, and Gabriel got a fistful of the coarse grey scruff, and was dragged 3 full strides across the yard on one knee before he could set his heel. A woman screamed from an upper window. The horses in the loose boxes crashed at their doors. "Hold him! For God's sake, hold! The musket, your grace, I beg you! Before someone is—" "No." Gabriel had the dog now, both arms locked round the heaving chest. His cheek turned against the rough coat, and the strain of it stood the cords out in his neck. But he could not soothe him. That was plain even to the boy with the soot on his hands. The dog would not be held. He would only be caged, and a caged terror is still terror. "No musket. No one is too, let me," said Nell. She had crossed half the yard without deciding to. She did not remember stepping off from the mounting block. She only found that she was walking, unhurried, out into the open cobbles, where no servant with any sense would go, and that every face had turned to her, and that her own heart was beating very hard and very steady, and that she was not afraid, which had always been the strange thing about her, the thing that had frightened other people more than any dog. "Get back, girl," Vane said sharply. "Whoever you are. Get back to the kitchens." "Let me," she said again, to the Duke. Only to the Duke. "Please, let him go." Gabriel Thorne looked up at her over the shoulder of the straining dog, and it was the first time he saw her. A slight young woman in the grey stuff gown and white cap of the lowest housemaid, plain as a wren, with a coil of dark hair coming loose at her neck, and a face that ought to have been ordinary and was not. There was something in the set of her that stopped the refusal in his throat. She was looking at the dog, not at him. She was looking at the dog the way a person looks at someone they have known a long time. "He will have your hand off," Gabriel said. "He won't. You do not know him." No, she had come to within a few feet now, and she sank down slowly, folding her grey skirts under her until she was kneeling on the hot cobbles at a little distance, lower than the dog's head, smaller than the dog, offering him nothing, asking him nothing. "But I know what he is. Let him go, your grace. He can't come to me while you're holding him." It was madness. Every rule of the household said so. Vane said so, loudly. But the Duke of Wolvercote, kneeling in the straw with his brother's hound shuddering in his arms, and no other thing in the world left to try, looked at the quiet maid on the cobbles, and something in her stillness reached him where nothing else had. His arms opened. He let the dog go. Nell did not move. She kept her eyes lowered, and her hands loose in her lap, palms up, and she began, very softly, to hum. Not a tune, exactly, only a low steady thread of sound, with no edges to it, the sound a person might make to bread rising, or to a fretful thing in the dark. The dog stood free and trembling 3 strides from her, ears flat, tail clamped, deciding whether to bolt. "Nobody move," she said, under the humming, not looking up. "Nobody speak. Missa, Vane, be still." And the extraordinary thing, the thing the whole yard would tell and retell in the servants' hall that night, and for 100 nights after, was that Mr. Vane was still. The dog took 1 step toward her. Then another. His nose came out, working, drinking the air off her, and she smelled to him, perhaps, of the road, and of strangeness, and of no threat whatever, of a person with nothing to prove, and nothing to fear, and nowhere she would rather be than exactly here. He came the last stride in a rush that made 3 men suck in their breath, and then the great wild wolfhound that no one at Wolvercote could tame, that had laid open a man's arm and dragged a duke across his own yard, dropped his heavy head and folded his forelegs, and knelt. There was no other word for it. Knelt down on the hot cobbles before the quiet maid, and pushed his enormous rough skull into her lap, and let out a long, shuddering breath that seemed to empty him of everything he had been carrying. Nell laid one hand between his ears. That was all. One hand. "There," she murmured. "There now. I've got you. There's no need for any of it." The silence in the yard was total. Even the horses had gone quiet. The wasp droned at the honeysuckle. The Duke of Wolvercote knelt where he was in the straw, his empty arms still half-curved around the shape of the animal that had left them, and stared at the girl as though she had done something not merely difficult, but impossible, something that unmade a rule of the world he had believed fixed. "Who are you?" he said. She did not look up from the dog. "Nell Cartwright, Your Grace. I came this morning. Under housemaid. You came this morning. Yes, and you have never seen this animal before in your life. No, Your Grace." Gabriel got slowly to his feet. He was aware of Vane at his shoulder, rigid with affront. Aware of the groom's gaping. Aware, distantly, that a duke did not kneel in straw, and did not stare at housemaids, and had a great many things he ought to be doing before 23 guests descended on Wolvercote in 11 days' time. He was aware of all of it, and could attend to none of it. He could only look at the small grey figure on the cobbles, with his brother's hound gone soft as a puppy under her hand, and feel something move in his chest that he had thought long since shut up and shuttered. "That will do," Vane said, recovering. He had gone a shade paler than the heat could account for. "Very prettily done, I am sure. Girl, leave the animal now and go to Mrs. Prior, you have duties. Your Grace, this changes nothing. The beast is dangerous, and a house full of guests is it changes," said Gabriel, without turning, "a very great deal. Your Grace, you may go. Mr. Vane, see to the North Meadow. We will speak of the guest list this evening." There was a small, cold pause. Nell felt it pass over her head like the shadow of a cloud, and she understood. Kneeling there, that she had made an enemy in her first 3 hours at Wolvercote, and that he was a beautiful man, with a clever cold face, who had wanted a thing done tonight and would now not get it, and would remember why. She kept her eyes on the dog. Bran's breathing had slowed under her palm. His eyes had half closed. She could feel his heart going, still too fast, but no longer racing, and she could feel, too, the exact place along his flank where the ribs stood too sharp, and the old fear worn into him like a groove into a doorstep. And she thought, someone left you. Someone you loved went away and did not come back, and no one has told you why. And you have been waiting in a yard full of strangers ever since. She knew a great deal about that. Vane went. His boots rang on the cobbles, and then were gone under the archway, and the yard let out its held breath all at once. Grooms and footmen, and the boy with the sooty hands. Everyone talking at once and no one moving closer. "Back to your work, the lot of you," called a new voice. Brisk, dry, female. A stout woman in black bombazine and a chatelaine of keys came sweeping out from the kitchen passage, taking in the scene with one sharp sweep of her eye, the overturned hurdle, the shaken men, the Duke in his shirt-sleeves, and the newest and lowest of her housemaids kneeling in the middle of it all, with the ungovernable dog laid meek in her lap. "Well," said Mrs. Prior, the housekeeper, and stopped. "I have run this house 19 years, and I did not think there was a sight left in it to surprise me. I stand corrected." "Mrs. Prior," the Duke's voice had gone formal again, but there was something unsteady in it still. "You have engaged a new girl." This morning, Your Grace. Cartwright came up from the agency in Bath with a very plain character and no fuss about her, which I own I liked. The housekeeper looked at Nell with a new and thoughtful narrowing of the eyes, though the agency did not see fit to mention she charms wild beasts on the side. That would have been worth an extra line, one imagines. Nell said nothing. She had learned, long ago, that the less she said the sooner people forgot to look at her, and being forgotten had kept her safe more times than she could count. But it was going to be difficult to be forgotten now. She could feel that too. "Get up, child, you'll ruin your gown," said Mrs. Pryor, not unkindly. "If I get up," Nell said, "he'll follow me. Then, he'll follow you. He can hardly stay in the yard, it wants sweeping." The housekeeper's mouth twitched. "You have made yourself a friend, I see, and there is no dropping a friend of that size once you have got one. Up now." Nell rose. She rose the way she did everything, without drama, one hand still resting on the dog's skull as she came to her feet so that the touch never quite broke, and Bran rose with her, unfolding his great grey length off the cobbles, and stood pressed to her side with his shoulder against her hip and his head level with her breastbone, and looked out at the whole yard from beside her, as if to say that the matter was settled now and they might all get on. The Duke of Wolvercote looked at the two of them standing there, the slight grey girl and the vast grey dog, and for the first time in longer than he cared to reckon, the tiredness around his mouth eased into something that was very nearly, though not quite, a different expression. "He has not let anyone touch him," Gabriel said, "since my brother went away." The words came out of him before he had decided to say them, and he heard himself say them, and could not think why he had told a thing so private, so carefully unspoken these 3 years, to a housemaid he had known the space of 10 minutes. Nell looked up at him then, properly, for the first time. Her eyes were grey too, he saw. Grey as slate under rain, and very steady, and there was in them no curiosity, no eagerness to know more, none of the hungry sympathy he had learned to dread on other faces. There was only a kind of quiet recognition, as though he had told her something she had already guessed. "No," she said. "I don't suppose he has. They wait a long time, the loyal ones, longer than's good for them." She glanced down at the dog, and her hand moved once, gently, over his ears. "But he's not broken, Your Grace. Whatever they've been telling you, he's only been left too long, with no one to tell him it's all right to be a dog again." Somewhere above them, a window closed. A church bell, St. Anselm's, in the village beyond the beeches, began to tell the hour of 5 across the hot fields, and the ordinary afternoon came flooding back into the yard, the smell of the meadow hay drying in the long acre, the sweetness of the honeysuckle, the far-off sound of a scythe. 11 days until the house filled. A steward gone off with a grudge, a dog that had chosen, out of all the souls at Wolvercote, the newest and least of them. "What am I to do with you, Nell Cartwright?" the Duke said, and it was not entirely a question about the dog. Mrs. Pryor cleared her throat. "If I may, Your Grace." The girl was engaged for the still room and the upper passages. "But it seems to me," and here the housekeeper looked from the dog to the maid, and back again with the air of a woman making a swift practical calculation, "that we have a more particular want in the house just now than another pair of hands for the linen, with the guests coming, and the animal as he is, and his Grace's own peace of mind to think of." She left it there, delicately. "You propose," said Gabriel slowly, "that I set a housemaid to mind my brother's hound." "I propose nothing, Your Grace. I merely observe that the hound has already set the housemaid to mind him, and that it is generally less trouble to agree with a dog of that size than to argue with him." Mrs. Pryor folded her hands over her keys. "Whether it is fitting is another matter, and above my station to say." It was not fitting. Gabriel knew it was not fitting. A duke 11 days from a house party did not reassign a raw agency girl from her proper work to the care of a single animal, however dear, on the strength of a quarter hour in a stable yard. It would set the servants' hall talking. It would set worse than the servants' hall talking, if certain of his guests took note. and Vane would make of it precisely the trouble he was best at making. Every consideration of sense and rank and prudence stood against it. And yet Bran stood with his shoulder against the girl's hip, and his eyes half shut, easy, quiet, at rest, for the first time in 3 long years, and Gabriel found he could not, would not, be the man who took that away from either of them, merely because it was not fitting. "A week," he said. "We will call it a week's trial. You will keep your place under Mrs. Pryor, and you will answer to her in all things. But the dog is your charge for the present, and you will come to me each evening at the library and tell me plainly how he does. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Grace." Nell dropped a small, neat curtsy, one hand still at the dog's neck. "And Miss Cartwright?" He had turned to go. He turned back. The late sun was full on him now, and she saw that he was younger than she had first taken him for. No more than 7 or 8 and 20 under all that gravity, and that the weariness in his face was a grief worn smooth and not a coldness at all. "Whatever it is you do with him, however it is you know what you know." He paused and chose the words with the care of a man unused to needing them. "I am not ungrateful. I have not had cause to say that in a great while. I find I have got out of the way of it." He went. His long stride took him under the archway and away toward the house, and the dog whined once, low, and pressed harder to her side. And Nell stood in the emptying yard with her hand on the warm, rough neck and watched the Duke of Wolvercote go, and felt the whole careful shape of the life she had come here to hide inside beginning, already, quietly, to come apart in her hands. She had come to Wolvercote to be no one. That had been the entire plan. A grey girl in a grey gown in a great house where no one would think to look at her twice, in a county 3 days' travel from the one place she could never go again, doing plain work under a plain name until the trouble behind her wore itself out and forgot her. She was very good at being no one. She had had a great deal of practice. And in 3 hours she had knelt in the middle of the busiest yard in the house, in front of the Duke and the steward and half the servants at Wolvercote, and made herself the one thing she had sworn never to be again. The girl who could do the thing no one else could do. The girl people remembered. The girl people talked about. "Oh, Bran," she said softly, and the dog looked up at her with his whole ruined, trusting heart in his eyes. "What have you done to me, you great foolish creature? What have we gone and done?" The bell finished tolling 5. Away across the beaches, on the Bath Road, a chaise was coming. She could not see it yet, but it was coming, and it would bring with it, in 11 days, or in 1, the first of the guests and the first of the questions, and the first hard tug on the thread that, once pulled, would unravel the whole of it. Nell Cartwright did not know that yet. She knew only that the light was going gold over the long acre, and that the dog would not leave her, and that a man who carried his sorrow like a stone in his chest had looked at her in the yard as though she were the first cool thing he had seen in a summer of drought. She gathered her skirts in one hand. "Come, then," she said. "Let's find you your supper, and see what's to be done with the both of us." And the great grey dog rose and went with her, matched to her step, out of the gold and into the shadow of the house. The servants' hall at Wolvercote was a long, low room under the west wing, stone-flagged and cool even in July, and when Nell came into it that evening with the great grey dog at her hip, the talk stopped as though a door had been shut on it. There were perhaps a dozen of them at the scrub deal table, footmen out of livery, a pair of kitchen maids, the still room woman, the boy with the sooty hands who had laughed in the yard and did not laugh now. A ham hung from the beam. The air smelled of boiled fowl and vinegar and the tallow of the working candles, and under it, faint and warm, the yeasty breath of the morning's bread. Every face turned to her, then every face turned to the dog, and the nearest kitchen maid drew her stool back 6 inches along the flags with a scrape that was very loud in the quiet. "He'll not trouble you," Nell said. "That's what they said of him a fortnight since," muttered a footman, before he took the length out of Sam Kennett's arm. "Sam Kennett," said a dry voice from the head of the table, cornered him with a pitchfork, which I should think would put the length out of any of us. Mrs. Pryor set down her cup. She had changed the bombazine of the afternoon for a plainer black, and she surveyed the room over the rim of her spectacles with the calm of a woman who had settled 1,000 suppers and would settle 1,000 more. "Sit down, Cartwright, there, by me. The animal may lie under the table, where he'll not put anyone off their food. If he means to guard you, he can do it out of sight." Nell sat. Bran folded himself down onto the cool flags at her feet with a groan like an old gate, and laid his heavy jaw across her shoe, and the whole table felt him settle, and slowly, warily, began to breathe again. "Well," said the still-room woman, whose name Nell would learn was Betsy, leaning in with frank, bright curiosity. "Go on, then. How's it done? Is it a word you say to him?" "My gran had a word for warts." "There's no word. There's summat. There's only being still," Nell said, "and not wanting anything off him." She took a little bread and did not look up. She could feel the whole room wanting the trick of it, the way people always wanted the trick, and she knew that if she let them think there was a trick she would be safe, for a trick can be envied and forgotten. Whereas the truth that she simply understood the creature, the way some people understand water or weather. The truth made people uneasy in a way that lasted. Any of you could do it. You've only to stop being afraid, and none of you can, and I don't blame you. "I can't, and I'll own it gladly," said Betsy, and there was a ripple of relieved laughter round the board, and the danger passed off for the moment. But not for all of them. At the far end, a lean footman named Peter had not laughed. He turned his fork in his fingers and watched her under his brows, and presently he said, in the tone of a man who has been saving it up, "Agency girl, ain't you? Come up from Bath?" "Yes, long way Bath, 3 days on the road at this season. Dear coaching too." He let it sit. Funny a girl'd spend what a place like this pays in half a year, coming all that way for a still-room post she could have had in any town between. Unless there weren't a town between, as would take her. The flags went quiet again. Bran lifted his head off her shoe. "That will do, Peter," said Mrs. Pryor, without heat, but the room heard the iron under it. "In this house we take a servant on her character and her work, not on the length of the road behind her. If the agency in Bath was satisfied, I am satisfied, and my satisfaction is the only sort that draws wages here." She reached for the loaf. You may all of you remember that the girl did in a quarter of an hour what a yard full of grown men could not do in a fortnight, and that she did it without laying a hand to any of you, which is more courtesy than most of you show the boot scraper. "Now eat." They ate. But Nell, buttering bread she did not want, felt Peter's eyes stay on her a moment longer than was comfortable, and felt too the small cold satisfaction with which he had said the word Bath, as though it were a stone he had picked up to keep in his pocket against later. She lowered her chin and let her hair fall forward, and made herself, by long practice, less, under the table, unseen. The dog's tail moved once against her ankle, and she pressed her foot very gently to his warm side, and thought, 2 of us now, 2 of us waiting to see whether the road catches up. She had not finished her bread when a footman came to the door with a message that Mr. Vane wished to see the new girl in the steward's room before she went up. Mrs. Pryor's spoon paused in the air. "Does he?" she said, to no one, and something crossed her face and was smoothed away. "Well, go along, child. The dog stops here." "The dog," said Nell, rising, "goes where I go." His Grace said his charge was mine. The housekeeper looked at her a long moment. "Yes," she said slowly. "He did say that, didn't he?" In front of Mr. Vane, and she said nothing more, but her eyes followed Nell to the door with a thoughtfulness that was almost warning. The steward's room lay off the estate passage, and it was nothing like the kitchen. It was a clerk's kingdom, a tall desk, a wall of ledgers in tooled calf, a branch of good wax candles burning though it wanted an hour of dark, the smell of ink and sealing wax and beeswax polish, and not a mote of dust anywhere. Mr. Vane stood behind the desk in his shirt sleeves, with a pen in his hand, and he did not look up when she came in, and he let her stand. She stood. She had stood in rooms like this before men who used silence as a whip, and she had learned that the trick was to give them nothing to catch on. No fidget, no clearing of the throat, no question. So she waited, hands folded, and the candles hissed, and Bran came in at her side and lay down across the doorway with his back to the passage and his eyes on Vane, and Vane's pen stopped. "That animal will wait outside." "He won't, sir." Vane looked up then. In candlelight his handsome face was all plains and shadow, and there was in it none of the heat of the yard. It had cooled to something far more careful. He set the pen down precisely in its tray. "You have had a remarkable day, Cartwright. 3 hours in the house, and already the talk of it, already excused your proper work. Already, I am told, correcting the housekeeper on the disposal of a dog." He came round the desk, unhurried, and leaned against its edge, and folded his arms. "I have run this estate 7 years. I have engaged and dismissed a great many servants, and I have an instinct which has never yet failed me for the ones who are running toward a place and the ones who are running away from another. I came for the work, sir, did you?" He smiled without any warmth at all. "There is a very tolerable employment agency in Wells. Another in Frome. A dozen households nearer than this that would have snapped up a still-room girl with a plain character. And yet you came from Bath, 3 days, at your own charge, or so I must suppose, since the agency does not advance coaching money, to a house you had never heard of, for wages you could better nearer home." He let his gaze travel over her, cool and thorough, and she felt it as she had felt Peter's, but worse, because Peter's had been idle malice, and this was purpose. "What is it you are running from, Cartwright?" The candles hissed. In the doorway, low, so low it was almost below hearing, the dog began to growl. "Nothing that need trouble Wolvercote, sir," Nell said. Her voice did not shake. She had made sure of that years ago. "I keep myself to myself, and I do my work, and I make no trouble. You'll find no fault in my work." "I shall look for one," said Vane pleasantly. "You may be sure of that. I shall write to your agency tonight, and to the mistress you left, whoever she was, and I shall know precisely what walked into this house this morning. And if there is anything at all, irregular in it, you will be on the Bath Road again, before His Grace has finished admiring the way you sit in the dirt with a dog." He straightened. He is grieved, and he is tired, and he is not, at present, quite himself, and a clever girl might make a good deal of that in 11 days, with a house full of witnesses. "I have seen it tried. I will not see it tried again." And there it was, the thing under the thing. Nell almost laughed, and did not. He thought she was a schemer. He thought she had come to catch a duke. It was so far from the truth, and so much safer than the truth, that for one dizzy moment she was tempted to let him believe it. "I've no designs on His Grace, sir," she said quietly. "Nor on you. Nor on anyone in this house but that dog, who wants feeding up and letting be, and who never did aught to earn a musket, except grieve too loud for anyone's comfort. Write your letters. I'll be here doing my work when the answers come." Something flickered behind Vane's eyes, surprise perhaps, that the wren had a voice. It hardened at once into dislike. "Get out," he said, "and take the beast." She went, but at the door she paused, one hand on the frame, and looked back at the beautiful cold man among his ledgers, and said, because she could not quite help it, "You'd have had it done tonight." The dog. Quietly, before His Grace could stop you. It was not a question. Why? What's a dog to you, one way or the other, that you'd trouble to be cruel about it? For just an instant, no longer than the crack of his glove in the yard, the steward's face was not cold at all. Something moved in it, quick and raw, gone before she could name it. Then the shutter came down. "Duties, Cartwright," he said. "A house runs on order, and that animal is disorder, and I do not suffer disorder in anything I am charged to keep. Nor, he added, taking up his pen again, in anyone. Good night. She climbed the back stair with the dog behind her and her heart going hard, and she thought, turning it over, he did not answer me. She had asked why, and he had told her what he did, not why he did it, and in her experience a man who would not tell you why was a man with a why worth hiding. She filed it away, next to the small raw flicker she had seen and could not read, and she wondered, as she was to wonder often in the days to come, whether Mr. Vane hated the dog for what it was, or for something it reminded him of, but that was for later. There was the library yet, and the Duke waiting, and her hands were not quite steady as she scrubbed the yard dirt from them at the pump before she went. The library at Wolvercote ran the length of the east front, 2 stories of books behind a gallery, and at this hour it was lit only at the near end, where a branch of candles burned on a great table, strewn with papers and estate maps, and a cold, untouched supper on a tray. The long windows stood open to the summer dark. Moths came and went at the flames. The whole warm night breathed in at them, cut hay and stocks in the border below, and the green river smell off the water meadow, and the Duke of Wolvercote sat among his papers in his shirt-sleeves, with his head in his hands, and did not hear her come in over the deep pile of the carpet, and for a moment she saw him as he was, when no one watched. Not a duke at all. Only a young man alone in a great house with too much on him. Bran solved the difficulty of announcing her. He crossed the library at a soft trot, claws clicking on the parquet border, and pushed his head under the Duke's arm, and Gabriel came up out of his hands with a start that turned at once to astonishment. He came to me, Gabriel said. He had gone very still. His hand hovered over the rough grey head, and then, slowly, settled. The dog leaned into it and sighed. He has not come to me since. He stopped. Under his palm the great head pushed harder, insisting, forgiving, and the man's throat worked. Steady, lad, steady. Yes, I have you. Nell stood back by the shadow of the shelves and let them have it, the way she had let the yard be still. She had a gift for knowing when to be furniture. You may come into the light, Miss Cartwright, Gabriel said presently, without looking up. I do not bite, whatever else this house may have told you of the family temper. They've told me nothing, Your Grace. Then, you are the first servant in the history of Wolvercote to be told nothing, and I congratulate you on it. He looked up at last, and the candlelight was kind to the tiredness in his face, and there was in his voice, faint and unexpected, the ghost of dryness. Sit there, no, as she hesitated over the fine chair. Sit, I say. I have had a report of my dog's health standing up from a groom every evening for 3 years, and it has done neither of us any good. You will make it sitting down, or I shall think you are hiding something, and Mr. Vane has doubtless done enough of thinking that for one household in a single day. So he knew of the interview. Of course he knew. A duke knew what his steward did in his own house. Nell sat on the edge of the chair, with her hands in her lap, and the dog came and put his weight against her knee. And Gabriel watched the animal choose her all over again, and something in his face tightened and eased at once. He does well, Nell said, because that was what she had come to say. Better than I looked for. He ate tonight, near 2 pounds of the boiled fowl scraps, and kept it. He drank. He slept an hour by the still room fire without starting up. The shaking's less. It'll come and go for a while yet. Worst at the times of day it happened. Whatever it was, she chose the word carefully, whatever it was that he lost. Dogs keep the hour of a grief the way we keep the day of it. But he's mending, Your Grace. He only wants what he's wanted all along. Company that stays. Gabriel was quiet. A moth went into the candle and out again, singed. My brother's dog, he said at last. Low. Julian's. He had him from a pup, carried him inside his coat the whole way from the fair at Taunton, a thing the size of a rat, and swore he'd be the greatest hound in the West Country, and by God he was right. Look at the size of the brute. His hand moved on the grey head. Julian went away 3 years ago this summer. There was a difference between us. Words said that ought not to have been said. On both sides. And then he was gone. And the dog has waited at the yard gate every evening since for a man who does not come. And no one has been able to go near him. And he stopped. His jaw set. I could not manage even that. His dog. The one thing of his left in the house, and I could not so much as put my hand on it. You will understand why it was not a small thing to me this afternoon. Yes, said Nell. She understood a great deal more than that. She understood the shape of the whole grief from the outside of it, the way you can tell the size of a room by its echo. But she said only, "He's not waiting at the gate tonight, Your Grace. He's here." That's a beginning. It is. He looked at her then, directly, and there was in the look a question he had not yet framed. "Miss Cartwright, where does a still-room girl from Bath learn what you know of grieving animals? For it is not a trick. Whatever you told my kitchen, I have kept dogs and horses all my life, and I have never seen the like. You did not tame him. He sought the word. You kept faith with him. Where does that come from?" The window breathed hay and stocks into the room. Bran's flank rose and fell against her knee, and Nell, who had come to Wolvercote to be no one, felt the true answer rise in her throat. The yard, the other yard. The man who had taught her, the reason she could never go back to it, and pressed it down, and pressed it down, and said, in a voice she kept quite level, "I was raised about animals, Your Grace. In the country. My father had a way with them, and I took it from him. That's all. There's no more to tell than that. It was true. It was also not the truth, and she saw, with a small cold drop of the heart, that the Duke of Wolvercote knew the difference. He did not press it. He was too tired, or too courteous, or too newly grateful, but she saw him mark it, saw him fold it away as neatly as Vane had folded away the length of the Bath Road, and she understood that she had lied to 2 men in one evening, and that both of them had believed the fact of the lie and not one word of its substance. "Your father," Gabriel said quietly. "Is he? He's gone from me, Your Grace. Some while since. I am sorry for it. So am I." She rose, because it was safer to be going than to be looked at, and the dog rose with her. "Same hour tomorrow, Your Grace? I'll bring you word. Same hour." He stood too, courteous, a full head above her in the candlelight, and for a moment neither of them moved, and the warm dark pressed at the windows, and it was Bran between them who broke it, sighing, leaning first to one, and then to the other, as though he could not choose, and did not wish to. Gabriel gave a short breath that was almost a laugh. "He would keep us both, I think. Dogs are greedy that way, Your Grace. They see no reason a body can't belong to more than one at once. It's the sense they have that we haven't." She curtsied. "Good night." She was at the door when the sound came. Wheels, far off and then not far off. The grind of an iron tire on the carriage sweep. The clatter and blow of hard-driven horses coming up out of the summer night much too fast for any hour of visiting. The chaise. The chaise off the Bath Road that she had felt coming since 5 o'clock like weather. Gabriel had already crossed to the window, and Nell saw his shoulders go square. "That is no tenant," he said low. "No one is expected these 11 days. A footman's voice rose somewhere below, and another, and a woman's laugh cut clear and bright across the dark. A laugh that knew its own welcome and did not doubt it. Gabriel's whole frame changed, braced, closed. The tiredness stiffening into a public face she had not yet seen him wear. "God help us," he said, under his breath, and it was not quite a jest. "She has come early. Of course she has come early." "Who, Your Grace?" But he had already started for the stairs, and the great doors of Wolvercote were being flung open below, and the warm night poured in the sound of an arrival, trunks, and orders, and that bright certain laugh again, nearer now, and Nell stood in the dark of the library doorway, with the dog pressed hard and suddenly bristling against her legs. and felt the thread she had come here to hide behind give its first long tug, and knew, without yet knowing a single name or face of it, that whatever was climbing the steps of Wolvercote out of that chaise had not come for the dog, and had not come for the guests 11 days hence, and would look at a grey girl on the stair with eyes a great deal sharper than Mr. Vane's. She drew back into the shadow. She put her hand on Bran's neck to still the rising growl. And below them both, up the wide bright stair, the footsteps came. The woman who came up into the candlelight moved as though the branch of candles had been lit expressly for her, and had only been waiting. She was beautiful, and she knew the exact worth of it. Travelling had put no disorder on her that she had not chosen. Her gown was a deep amber silk, with the dust of the road grey along its hem. Her fair hair was glossed and smooth beneath a bonnet already untied, and swinging from 2 gloved fingers, and her face, turned up to the light, was lovely in the cold, flawless way of a thing cut from ivory. She smelled, even from the shadow where Knelt stood, of lavender water and hot silk, and the leather of a well-sprung chaise. Under Knelt's hand the great dog's hackles rose in a slow ridge, and a sound began in his chest, low and steady, a sound with no bottom to it. "Gabriel," the woman said, and the single word carried the whole of a claim. The Duke had reached the head of the stair. Knelt watched the change come over him and did not like it, the way the warmth of the library closed off him like a shutter drawn, the way he went from a tired young man to a piece of the house's furniture, tall and correct and giving nothing. "Lady Honoria," he bowed, "we did not look for you this fortnight and more." "No. Was it not wicked of me?" She laughed, that bright, certain laugh that had come up the stair ahead of her, and put out both hands to him, as though the 11 days did not exist. "Papa's house at Cranley is all packed up for the seaside, and I could not abide Weymouth another hour with my aunt talking of her liver. So I have simply come to you early, and you shall have to bear me. An earl's daughter may descend on a duke whenever she pleases. It is one of the few advantages of the arrangement." Her gaze went past his shoulder, took in the open library, the strewn maps, the cold supper, and came back to his face with a sweetness that had a small blade folded inside it. "You are working. At this hour. Gabriel, you will make yourself dull. The estate does not keep town hours. The estate," said Lady Honoria, "will still be here when you are grey and cross, and so, I fear, shall I." Then she saw the dog. Knelt felt the recoil pass through the woman before it reached her face, a flinch smoothed over so quickly that anyone not watching for it would have missed it entirely, and Knelt was always watching for it. Lady Honoria's smile did not falter, but her hand had closed on the ribbons of her bonnet, and the colour of her had changed by a shade, and Bran stood rigid at Knelt's hip, with his lip lifting off the long teeth, and the growl climbing. "You still keep the creature," Lady Honoria said. "He is my brother's. He is a savage, is what he is. I remember him. A pause, delicate as a dropped stitch. I remember a great many things about that summer." She turned the full light of her attention then, at last, upon the grey girl in the grey gown standing in the shadow of the shelves, with her hand on the animal's neck, and her fine brows drew together in a puzzlement that was not quite unkind and not quite anything else. "And who is this? Gabriel, since when do you keep a housemaid to hold your dog for you in your own library at 10 o'clock at night?" Scene 2 came the next morning, and it came, as such things do, through the servants' hall. Knelt was down before 6, with Bran padding at her heel, and the long stone-flagged room was already thick with it. The talk, the leaning in, the low delighted horror of a great house with a great piece of news to turn over. The kettle sang on the range. The smell of frying bacon and scalded milk hung warm under the beams, and a wasp had got in at the window and was drowning slowly in the jam. "Lady Honoria Sefton," Betsy said, before Knelt had got her apron tied, as though the name were a sweet she could not keep in her mouth. "The Earl of Cranley's daughter, and the beauty of 3 seasons, and the whole county has had her promise to his grace since before the old Duke was called in, since before the old Duke went." She caught Mrs. Prior's eye, and amended it hastily. This 2 years and more, any road. She'll be Duchess of Wolvercote by Michaelmas, they all say. She says it loudest of all. Then the county may say it, said Mrs. Pryor, setting down the teapot, and so may she, and neither the saying makes it so. Poor Betsy, and gossip less. But Peter, at the far end, turned his fork over in his long fingers and watched Nell with the small stone of satisfaction he had picked up the night before. There was more to that summer than a wedding not made, he said. Ask anyone been here longer than a 12-month. 2 brothers, and the one lady between 'em, and her smiling on Lord Julian all that June, and then His Grace comes into the title, and of a sudden it's His Grace she's smiling on, and Lord Julian's gone by August, with hard words in the hall, and never a letter since. He tipped his head at the dog under the table. That's when the beast went wrong, waited at the gate ever after. You want to know why he growls at her ladyship? Ask him. He knows whose fault it is his master's gone. The room had gone quiet. Nell buttered her bread and kept her chin down, but under the table her foot found Bran's warm side and pressed, and she thought, so that is the shape of it. Not a difference between brothers over land or money at all. A woman who chose the coronet over the man, and a man who could not stay to watch it, and a dog left holding the whole of a grief no one would name. She understood now why Gabriel had shut it at the top of the stair. He was courting, or being courted into, the very thing that had cost him his brother, and he knew it, and he did it because a duke did the thing that was expected, and it was slowly turning him to stone. That will do, Peter, said Mrs. Pryor, but she said it more slowly than she had the night before, and her eyes rested a moment on Nell, with something in them that was almost pity, and Nell felt the morning turn cold in the warm room. Lady Honoria found her in the stable yard after breakfast. Nell had taken Bran out into the early cool to run the fear off him along the paddock rail, and the yard smelled of dew, burning off warm cobbles, and of the honeysuckle heavy on the wall, and the doves were at it in the loft, and into all of it came the amber silk and the lavender water, picking a delicate path around the puddles with a groom bowing before her. You are the girl, Lady Honoria said. From the library. Yes, my lady. Nell curtsied and kept the dog behind her skirts, for Bran had gone stiff again and low. They tell me the most extraordinary thing, that this animal, that has torn a man and terrified the whole house, lies down at your feet like a lamb and will not do it for anyone living. She came closer than was wise and looked at the dog with a fixed bright interest that had no warmth in it at all, and Nell read the look and did not care for what she read there. How clever of you. How very clever. Tell me your name. Cartwright, my lady. Nell Cartwright. The morning did not change. The doves did not stop. But something crossed the beautiful face, a small arrest, a check, the flicker of a person who has heard a note out of an old song and cannot at once place it, and Lady Honoria's head tilted, and her eyes went narrow and thoughtful over Nell's plain grey gown and her steady grey stare. Cartwright, she repeated, and you have a way with a beast that no one has taught you. A gift for it, in the blood, one might say. She smiled, and it was a lovely smile, and it made the hair rise on Nell's arms. How curious. I knew a Cartwright once, a man who could gentle any horse in 3 counties, and did, until the day one of them proved him a liar and put me into a hedge and made a cripple of me for half a year. The smile did not move. Cranley sent him off without a character. There was a matter of my mother's diamonds, too, gone the same week the Cartwrights went, though nothing was ever proved. A great scandal, in its little way. Tom Cartwright, his name was. You would not be any relation, I suppose, to a disgraced horsebreaker off the Cranley land. Nell heard the yard go very far away. She heard her own voice come out of her level, and lo, as she had trained it, years and years ago, for exactly this. It's a common enough name, my lady. It is not, you know, said Lady Honoria pleasantly. It is not common at all. And she gathered her amber skirts out of the puddle and went. and the last Knelt saw of her she was crossing to the house with the light quick step of a woman who has found in a dull country morning precisely the sort of small delicious weapon she had not known she wanted. Knelt stood by the paddock rail, with the dew soaking cold through her thin shoes, and Bran pressed hard and trembling against her legs, and she put her hand down onto his skull without knowing she did it, and steadied herself on him as much as she steadied him. "There," she said, under her breath, to the dog, to herself. "There now. It's come. I knew it would come." Her hand was not quite steady on the rough grey coat. "She'll go to him. She'll go to him with my father's name in her mouth, and she'll say it in a way that makes me a thief's daughter and a liar and a schemer come to catch a duke, and there'll be no unsaying it because it's half true, and the worst half is the true half." Bran leaned his whole weight into her, and whined, and looked up at her with his ruined, trusting heart. You know. You always know." She drew a long breath of honeysuckle and warm stone, and made herself straighten. "Well, then I'll say it first. I'll say it plain to his grace tonight, before she can, and let him send me off if he must, but he'll send off the truth of me, and not her pretty lie." It was a fine resolve. It lasted until the middle of the afternoon, when Vane sent for her. The steward's room was cool and dim and smelled of ink and beeswax, and Mr. Vane stood behind his tall desk with 2 letters open before him, and Lady Honoria seated in the good chair at his side, and Knelt understood, the moment she came through the door with the dog at her heel, that she had been too slow, and that the thing she had meant to carry to the Duke herself had already been carried, and by 2 hands, and dressed for the occasion. "Shut the door," Vane said. He did not sit. He had the look of a man who has drawn a very long game to exactly the square he wanted. "You will be glad to know, Cartwright, that my letters to Bath were answered promptly. The agency confirms what her ladyship has been so good as to tell me from her own memory. You are Thomas Cartwright's daughter, of the Cranley estate. Dismissed these 4 years for the ruin of a valuable animal and the injury of her ladyship, under the shadow, never lifted, of a theft of jewels. You gave the agency a false parish and no true character, and you came here under a plain name to a house 3 days distant precisely because no house within 30 miles of Cranley would have opened its door to a Cartwright." He laid one hand flat on the letter. "Have you anything to say that is worth my hearing?" The candles were not lit. The afternoon sun came dusty through the one high window and lay across the ledges. Bran had placed himself across the doorway with his back to the passage and his eyes on Vane, and the low growl had begun again, and Lady Honoria drew her amber skirts an inch closer about her ankles. "My father ruined nothing," Knelt said. "He told them the grey was too green to be ridden that day, and her ladyship rode him against his word, and when she came off it was my father they blamed for the fault, because it is always easier to break the man than to own the mistake." She kept her eyes on Vane and her voice level, and did not raise it. "He never took so much as a horseshoe that wasn't his. The diamonds were found, if you want the truth of it, found 6 months after in the strong room, where the housekeeper had put them for the summer and forgot, but by then my father had no name left to give them back to, and no one thought it worth the trouble of clearing a groom who was already gone. That's the whole of the scandal, Mr. Vane. A frightened girl, and a proud family, and a good man broke for other folks' faults. I'm not ashamed of a word of it. I only hid it because a name like that shuts every door, whether it earned the shutting or no." "A very affecting account," said Lady Honoria softly. "One almost believes it. But then she has a great gift, Mr. Vane, for making the wild thing lie down and the hard thing sound gentle. I have watched her do it with the dog. I should be sorry to see her do it with his grace." "You need not fear it, my lady," said Vane. "His grace shall hear the plain facts and be left to draw his own conclusion. I flatter myself I have never yet had to tell that gentleman what to think." He folded the letters with his neat white hands, and for one instant, no longer than the crack of his glove in the yard the day before, Knelt saw again that raw, quick flicker cross his cold face when his eyes went, unwilling, to the dog in the doorway. And then it was gone, and he was all steward again. You will not go to the library tonight. You are relieved of the animal and of your place both, pending his Grace's word, which I shall carry to him myself within the hour. You may keep to your room. The beast, his mouth thinned, the beast will have to be secured. That, at least, this house should have seen to a fortnight since. He'll not be secured, Knelt said. He'll not let a soul near him but me. And you know it, and you'd have known it when you signed his warrant yesterday over your coffee. That's why you want me gone, Mr. Vane, not for my father's name. For his. She looked down at Bran, at the great grey length of him strung tight across the door, guarding her still, and her throat closed, and she made herself go on. You want the dog gone so bad you'd take the one person in England who can keep him quiet and put her on the road for it. I've asked you once why. I'll ask you no more. But it's not order you're keeping, whatever you tell his Grace. It's a wound. I know one when I see it. The steward's face did not change, but his hand, laid flat on the folded letters, pressed down until the knuckles whitened, and he said, very quietly, "Go to your room, Cartwright." And it was the quietness of a man holding a door shut against something on the other side of it. She went. She did not reach her room. She had got no farther than the turn of the back stair, with the dog crowding at her heels and her heart going hard and sick, when the green baize door at the passage end swung and the Duke of Wolvercote came through it. And by the look on his face, she knew that Vane had been quicker even than his word, that the letters had gone up already, that the plain facts had been laid before him neat as a bill of account, and that whatever had stood between them last night in the warm dark, with the moths at the candle, was gone. Shuttered. Cold. Miss Cartwright. His voice was the stone voice from the top of the stair. He stood a full head above her in the dim passage, and the summer light from the window at his back put all his face in shadow so that she could not read it, and had to go by the voice, and the voice gave her nothing. Is it true? That you came into my house under a name that was not wholly your own, and a history you took care I should not learn? Yes or no? I find I do not want it dressed. Down the passage, in the doorway of the steward's room, Nell could see them both, Vane rigid at his desk, Lady Honoria risen, and watching with her lovely face composed into exactly the right grave concern, and she understood that this was to be done here, in the servants' passage, in front of the pair who had built it, and that they had chosen the ground on purpose. Bran pressed against her and shook. Yes, Your Grace, she said. It's true I gave a plain name. It's true, there's a history. It's not true I'd have hidden it from you past tonight. I meant to tell you myself this evening. At the library, before her ladyship could. And you may believe that or not as you like, for I've no way to prove a thing I didn't get the chance to do. She lifted her chin and made herself meet the shadowed face. But I never lied to you about the dog, nor about your brother, nor about a single living thing that mattered. I told you where the gift came from, and it was the truth. I only left out the price that came with it. You told me, Gabriel said slowly, that your father had a way with animals, and that you took it from him, and that there was no more to tell. The words came out flat, and she heard beneath the flatness the thing that hurt him worst, worse than any diamond or any dismissal, that she had sat in his library with his brother's dog under her hand, and looked at his oldest grief, and told him a half-truth, and that he had known it, and had let it pass, and trusted her past the knowing. There was a very great deal more to tell. There was. And I didn't tell it, because I've learned what happens to a Cartwright the moment the name is out, and I'd have been on the road inside the hour, and the dog with no one. Her voice caught. Once, and she mastered it. I've been on that road before, Your Grace. I know exactly how long it is. A door opened somewhere above and shut again. The house held its breath around them, and Nell saw the Duke of Wolvercote stand at the crossing of it. The woman his county, and his duty, and his dead father's wishes had laid out for him on one side, in amber silk, with the facts all on her side. And on the other a grey girl in a grey gown with a poisoned name, and a wild dog but loved her. And nothing on her side at all but his own, last night's warmth, which the daylight had made to look like the beginning of exactly the sort of scheme every prudent man is warned against. "Your Grace," said Vane, from the doorway, gentle as ruin. "The animal cannot stay loose with the house filling. And the girl cannot stay. You see that. Say the word, and it is done tonight. Both matters. Cleanly. And you need never think of it again." And Gabriel Thorne looked at Knell a long moment in the shadowed passage, and something moved behind his eyes that she could not read, and dared not hope was mercy, and he opened his mouth to give the word. Then Bran moved. The great grey dog came up off the flags in one silent surge, and crossed the passage, not at Knell, not at the Duke, but at the doorway of the steward's room, at the amber silk, and Lady Honoria screamed and fell back against the doorframe, and Vane's hand went for the bell pull, and the whole thing hung for one endless breath on the edge of catastrophe, with the hound's teeth bared not a foot from her ladyship's throat, and every rule of the world about to come down on all their heads at once. Bran. Knell did not shout it. She never shouted. "Bran. To me." And the dog stopped. Stopped dead, quivering, teeth still bared, and then turned his heavy head and looked back at her, down the length of the passage, torn, ruined, waiting, and into that one suspended instant, before the dog could choose, and before the Duke could speak the word, and before Vane could ring the house down upon her. A new voice came from the head of the servants' stair, winded, road-stained, hoarse with 3 years and a hard ride, and it stopped the breath in every throat in the passage. "Bran?" it said. God's teeth. "Bran." And Knell, turning with the rest of them toward the stair, saw a tall, thin, travel-worn young man standing at the top of it, with the dust of the Bath Road grey on his coat, and Gabriel's own dark eyes in a harder, younger face. And she did not need Lady Honoria's stricken whisper of his name, nor the way the Duke went white to the lips beside her, to know that the brother who had gone away 3 summers since, and never written, had come home to Wolvercote at the one hour that could ruin them all. For a moment, no one in the passage breathed. The travel-worn young man came down the servants' stair, one slow step at a time, his hand trailing the wall, as though he did not quite trust the floor of his father's house to hold him, and his eyes were only for the dog. "Bran," he said again, cracked and low. "It's me. It's only me, you great fool. Come here." And the wolfhound went. He went the way a river goes over a broken weir, all at once, silent, unstoppable, the length of the passage in 3 surging strides. And he struck Julian Thorne in the chest hard enough to sit him down on the stair, and then there was no more savagery in him anywhere. None, only a whining, wriggling, weeping ecstasy of a dog, forepaws scrabbling at the dusty coat, tongue at the road-stained jaw, tail beating the banister rail like a flail. Julian got both arms round the huge grey neck, and bowed his head into the coarse coat, and made a sound that a man makes when he has held something at arm's length for 3 years, and can hold it no longer. Knell put her hand over her mouth. Beside her the Duke of Wolvercote stood white and rigid, and she saw his throat work, and saw the word he had been about to speak, the word that would have finished her, go out of him entirely, forgotten, unspoken, drowned in the sight of his brother on the stair with the dog that had waited. "He knew you," Knell heard herself whisper, "all this time. He knew you were coming before you did. That's why he wouldn't be caged." Julian looked up over the dog's shoulder and found the 2 of them, the Duke and the grey girl, and his face, so like Gabriel's and so much harder used, went through a whole weather of things at once. "Gabe," he said hoarsely. "Julian," the single word came out of the Duke like something torn. "You came home. I came home." Julian got to his feet, one hand fisted in the scruff of the dog who would not leave his side now, and the dust rose off his coat in the dim passage light, and he smelled, even from where Knell stood, of hard riding and road dust, and a long weariness. "I'd have come sooner. God knows I'd have come the first month," The first week, I did come. Near enough, as far as the Marlborough Turnpike, and turned back like a coward because you never answered. 3 years I wrote, Gabe. 3 years, and not a line back from you. And a man tells himself a story out of a silence like that, and the story I told myself. He stopped. His jaw set exactly as his brother's did. But I could not stay away from the one thing. I could bear you hating me. I could not bear leaving him at that gate. The passage had gone deathly still around them, and into the stillness, quiet and terrible. Gabriel said, I never had a letter. Julian, in 3 years I never had one word from you. Not one. The brothers looked at each other across 10 feet of stone flags, and Nell watched the same thought arrive in both faces at the same instant and turn them both, slowly, together, toward the doorway of the steward's room, where Mr. Vane stood very straight behind his desk, with his neat white hands flat upon the folded letters, and his cold, beautiful face gone the color of the tallow candles, and did not say a word. You wrote, Gabriel said, not to Vane yet, to Julian, his voice climbing out of its stone. You swear it. You wrote to me. On my honor, every quarter day, and oftener. To you, and to father while he lived, and after. Julian's eyes were fixed on the steward now, narrowing, remembering. I directed them here. Where else would I direct them? To the house. To be brought up to you with the rest of the post. To be sorted and carried and laid on your desk by the man whose whole office it is to sort and carry and lay the post. Lady Honoria, Vane said, and his voice was not quite steady. This is a family matter and no fit thing for. Be quiet. It was Nell who said it. She had not meant to. It came out of her low and flat, the voice she used on the dog, and it landed in the room with the same weight, and the steward's mouth closed. She stepped forward off the wall. You asked me last night what I was running from, Mr. Vane, and I told you nothing that need trouble Wolvercote, and I meant it. But I'll ask you my question again now, the one you wouldn't answer. Why the dog? Why did you want him gone so bad you'd sign his warrant over your coffee and put a girl on the road to do it? She looked at the letters under his white hand. It's because he waited, isn't it? Every evening at that gate, where you could see him from this very window, waiting for a man you'd made certain would never know he was welcome to come home. The candles were not lit, and the afternoon sun had moved off the sill, and the steward's room had gone grey and close, and in the grey Nell watched the thing she had glimpsed twice before, the raw quick flicker under the cold, rise up in James Vane's face and stay this time, and not go down. You understand nothing, he said. But he said it the way a man says a thing he no longer believes. I have kept this house 7 years. 7 years, through the old Duke's long declining, through the debts his lordship there ran up at Newmarket and left me to bury quiet in the accounts, through the whole slow ruin of a great name. And I held it. I held it together with my 2 hands. His voice had begun to shake, and he could not stop it. And then his lordship goes off in a temper over a woman, and his grace comes into a title he was not bred to and cannot carry, half broke with grief. And I saw plain, as I see you, that if the pair of them came together again it would be Newmarket and worse, 2 young fools and a fortune, and the house down about all our ears inside 5 years. So he looked at the letters. His hand pressed them flat. So I kept the disorder out, as I am charged to do, as I have always done. You kept my brother out, Gabriel said, very low. I kept the ruin out. I did not think, and here the steward's composure broke clean across, and his beautiful face crumpled into something almost young. I did not think it would be 3 years. I did not think he would stop. I thought he would come himself, or you would ride after him, or the thing would mend of its own accord as such things do, and I would burn the letters, and no one the wiser, and the house safe. And instead the dog sat at the gate every evening for 1,000 evenings, and looked at me through this window as though he knew, and I could not. I could not put my hand to that animal any more than his grace could, because every time I went near him I knew what I had done, and he knew. And there is no order in the world, Cartwright, that will let a man sleep with a thing like that lying at his gate. He drew a breath that scraped. I wanted it gone because I could not bear to be watched by it. There, you have your why. Are you the better for it? No one moved. The wasp had drowned in the jam next door, and the house was so still that Nell could hear the doves settling in the loft across the yard. Then, without any hurry, Mr. Vane bent and drew a key from his watch chain and unlocked the deep bottom drawer of his desk and lifted out a bundle of letters tied with a faded tape, a great thick sheaf of them, browned at the edges, the direction on the topmost gone pale with 3 years of dark. And he came round the desk, and he crossed the floor, and he laid them down on the passage table within the Duke's reach, beside the branch of unlit candles. They are all here, he said, every one. I could not bring myself to burn them. I told myself it was carelessness. It was not carelessness. He stepped back. The uppermost is the first. He wrote it from a posting in at Chippenham the second night, before he was even out of the county. Gabriel took up the bundle in both hands as though it might come apart, and worked one letter free of the tape, and unfolded it, and Nell watched his eyes go down it, and watched the years go over his face like cloud shadow over the long acre. He read aloud, because he could not, it seemed, keep it inside himself. Gabe, I have got as far as Chippenham and no farther, for the truth is, I do not want to go at all, and if you will only write and tell me the half of it was my own folly, I will turn the horse round tomorrow, and we will neither of us ever speak her name again. His voice failed. He lowered the letter. He was 30 miles off. He was 30 miles off, and asking to come home. And I thought, all this while I thought he had gone gladly, and shaken the dust of us off, and never looked back. I looked back the whole way, Julian said thickly. Gabriel turned to the steward, and Nell braced for the fury, and it did not come. What came was worse, and quieter. You have served this house since before I could ride, the Duke said. My father trusted you above any man living, and you took 3 years of my brother's life and mine, and shut them in a drawer to keep your ledgers tidy. He set the letters down, very gently, on the table. I cannot have you here after this, James. You know I cannot. I know it. The steward stood straight. Whatever had broken in him had settled now into something stripped and plain. I will be gone by morning. I ask no character of you. I have not earned one, and I would not insult you by taking one. There is money owed me to Lady Day. Keep it against the trouble I have made. He looked, once, at the great grey dog pressed to Julian's leg, and the raw thing crossed his face a last time, and he mastered it. I am sorry, he said to Julian, and it cost him visibly, every word of it, 3 years' worth. I told myself it was for the house. It was for my own pride, that could not bear a thing it had not arranged. That dog kept better faith at a gate than I kept with my own charge. I am sorry for it. Aye, said Julian. Rough, well, he's here now. And so am I. That's more than a man that did what you did had any right to hope for. So take it and go, and I'll try to be glad you couldn't strike the match. He put his hand down on the dog's head. For his sake I'll not curse you. He wouldn't want it. James Vane bowed, to the Duke, to his brother, and last and briefest to the grey girl he had meant to break, and he went out of his cold, clean kingdom for the final time, and his boots rang once on the flags, and then were gone, and the branch of candles he had not lit stood on the table beside a bundle of 3 years' silence come undone. And into the ringing quiet Lady Honoria Sefton laughed. It was not her bright, certain stare laugh. It had a thin, high edge to it now, and she pressed one gloved hand to her amber bosom, and produced it deliberately, into the middle of the brothers' reunion, to remind them all that she was still there. How very affecting, she said. Servants' letters and a weeping dog. Gabriel, you cannot mean to let a steward's confession and a stray girl's theatricals overturn everything that was settled between our families before either of you was breached. My father, Your father, said Julian, turning to her at last, and Nell saw the whole of that lost summer arrive in his face, will be interested to learn, Honoria, that in the same June you smiled on me at every ball in the county, and let me believe I had only to speak. You were writing to my brother that I had trifled with you and used you ill, and that you feared for your good name in my company. I know, because Gabriel is an honest fool, and showed me the letters that August, in the hall, in the worst hour of my life, thinking he was warning me off a woman who had wronged me, when the truth was, you had written to each of us the opposite of the other, and set two brothers at each other's throats to see which coronet came off best in the sorting. He shook his head slowly. You did not choose the Duke over the man, Honoria. You wagered on both, and waited to be sure which of us the title would land on. And when it landed on Gabe, you buried me. I could not for the life of me understand how he'd turned on me overnight. Now I do. He believed you. God help him. He believed you. Because you are very good. The lovely ivory face did not so much as ripple. But her hand had closed hard on the folded bonnet ribbons, and a small muscle moved once at the corner of her jaw, and Nell, who had spent her life at the edge of rooms, watching for exactly that flicker, saw the calculation flash through and land, and saw her ladyship change her ground between one breath and the next. You are overwrought, Honoria said, to Gabriel now, warm, reasonable, appealing, both of you, after such a shock. We will none of us say tonight what cannot be unsaid. Send this girl to her room, and let the family, the girl, said Gabriel, stays exactly where she is. He crossed the passage and stood beside Nell, and though he did not touch her, she felt the whole warm bulk of him at her shoulder like a wall come round to her side. And she understood, with a lurch of something she was afraid to name, that he had chosen his ground too. Cartwright, Honoria said, and her voice cooled a full 10 degrees. You would take a thief's daughter over the word of an earl's. She came here under a false parish, Gabriel, to a house 3 days from where her name is dirt, and within a day she has your dog, your steward's place emptied, and now, I see, your arm. That is not a gift with animals. That is a very great deal of managing, very quickly done. I told Mr. Vane so this morning, and I tell you so now. Nell felt the old cold close over her, the churchyard cold of the name that shut every door. But she was tired, all at once, of being small. She lifted her chin. My father was Tom Cartwright, that gentled horses on the Cranley land, she said, clear, to the whole passage, to Julian, to the Duke, to the beautiful cruel woman in amber. He told her ladyship the grey was too green to ride the day she rode him against his word, and came off into a hedge, and they broke him for the fault of it because it's easier to break a groom than to own a bad seat. And they let it be whispered he'd had the diamonds too, which were found 6 months after in the strong room, where the housekeeper had put them, and forgot. Found, my lady. And you know they were found, for it was your own mother's woman that found them, and not a soul at Cranley troubled to say so aloud. Because by then my father had no name left worth the mending. Her voice held. He's in the churchyard these 3 years, with a lie for a headstone. I came here under a plain name because a true one would have had me on the road inside the hour, same as it's like to now. That's the whole of my managing, my lady. A dog that grieved, and a girl that knew grief when she saw it. You may make what you can of it. The passage was silent, and Julian Thorne said, slowly, Tom Cartwright. The Cranley horsebreaker. He looked at Honoria with a new and colder understanding. I remember that summer too, you know. I remember your mother's diamonds turning up in the autumn, and the whole thing hushed. And I remember a good man sent off without a character on your say-so, and everyone at Cranley knowing he was wronged, and no one lifting a finger, because it was easier. He turned to his brother. She is telling the truth, Gabe. I'd stake the estate on it. It has exactly the shape of how things were done in that house. Gabriel looked down at Nell. He looked at her for a long moment in the failing light, at the grey gown and the loosened dark hair, and the steady slate-colored eyes that had never once, in all of it, asked him for anything. "You meant to tell me tonight," he said quietly. "At the library." Before she could. "I did. You may believe it or not. I believe it." He said it simply, and the simplicity of it went through her like warm water. "I have had, this last hour, a very hard schooling in what it costs to believe a beautiful lie over a plain truth. I do not mean to sit that lesson twice." He turned to Lady Honoria, and his voice went formal and final, the shutter drawn all the way down at last, but drawn now on her side of the door, and not on Nell's. "Lady Honoria, there has never been an engagement between us, whatever our fathers hoped, and there will be none. Your chaise is doubtless still in the yard, the horses barely out of the traces. I would take it very kindly if you were in it within the hour. I will write to your father myself, and I will be scrupulously courteous, and I will tell him nothing that need touch your name, which is more mercy than you showed a groom in his grave, and a great deal more than you showed my brother. Good evening." For one instant the mask slipped entire, and Nell saw what was underneath it. Not sorrow, not shame, only a cold flat fury at a game lost. And then Lady Honoria Sefton gathered it all up smooth again, and inclined her head the exact civil degree, and said, "You will regret this before Michaelmas, the pair of you, with that creature loose in the house, and that girl at your elbow," and swept down the passage and out through the green baize door, in a rustle of amber silk and lavender water, and did not once look back, and was gone. The doves murmured in the loft. Somewhere a footman, greatly daring, began to sweep the hall. And in the grey passage the three of them stood, the Duke and the brother come home, and the grey girl, with a bundle of undone letters on the table, and a great wolfhound turning his heavy head from one loved face to the next, unable to choose, and no longer needing to. "Well," said Julian, on a long, unsteady breath, and scrubbed his sleeve across his eyes, and pretended he had not. "This is a homecoming and a half. I ride 3 days on a rumour that the beast is to be put down, and I arrive to find a steward toppled, an earl's daughter rooted, and my brother stood shoulder to shoulder with a housemaid as though the roof were coming in and she were the only beam holding it up." He looked from Gabriel to Nell and back, and something rueful and warm came up under the road dust in his tired young face. "I have been away 3 years, Gabe, and I am no fool, whatever else I am. Give me the dog and point me at a bath and a plate of something, and take the girl into the library, and say to her the thing you have plainly been dying to say since I came down the stair. I'll not have it on my account that 2 more people at Wolvercote go 3 years saying nothing. Bran, come, you monstrous article. Come and be fed." The dog looked up at Nell. "Go on," she said softly, and her hand moved once over the rough ears. "Go with him. He's yours, and you're his, and you've both waited long enough. I'll not be far." And the great grey hound that no one at Wolvercote could tame went with Julian Thorne down the passage toward the kitchens, matched to his step, shoulder at his hip. And Nell stood and watched him go without a pang, because a thing given back to where it belongs leaves no pang behind it, only room. The library was full of the last of the light. The long windows still stood open to the summer dusk, and the moths had come again to the candles on the great table, and the whole warm dark breathed in at them, off the water meadow, cut hay, and stocks. And the green river smell, and it was, Nell thought, standing just inside the door, with her hands folded, exactly as it had been the night before, and nothing at all as it had been, because everything underneath had shifted. "I do not know how to begin," Gabriel said. He stood by the table with the branch of candles lighting one side of his tired face, and he had turned his cuffs back off his brown forearms as though he were about to set his hands to some heavy work, and perhaps he was. "I have spent 3 years learning to say nothing at all. It is a hard habit to put off in an evening." "Then don't," Nell said. "There's no call to make a speech of it, Your Grace. You've had a shock and a joy in the 1 hour, and a body's fare worn thin by that. Say what's plain, and leave the rest for another day." I've all the days you like." He looked at her. "That," he said, "is precisely the thing I mean to speak about. The days." He crossed to her, unhurried, a full head taller in the candlelight, and stopped an arm's length off, the way he had stopped an arm's length off the dog in the yard, slow, careful, offering the flat of his open honesty. "I have had, since yesterday, a housemaid come to my library each evening to tell me plainly how my brother's dog does. And I have found, I will say it badly, there is no help for it. I have found that I do not care 2 straws about the dog by the end of it. I care that you come. I have caught myself watching the clock toward the hour the way that animal watched the gate. I who could not put my hand to a single living thing in this house for 3 years. His voice dropped. "You did not tame him, you told me. You kept faith with him. I have been thinking all day that it is the truest thing anyone has said in this house in a great while, and that I should like, more than I have wanted anything since my brother rode off, I should like someone to keep that kind of faith with me." Nell's throat had gone tight. "Your Grace, Gabriel," he said, "in this room, at this hour, with the moths in the candles and no one by. Gabriel, Gabriel." She said it, and the saying of it was the whole register of the thing breaking, the way she had told him a name could break, and she saw him hear it. "I came here to be no one. That was the entire plan of it. A grey girl in a grey gown that no one would look at twice. And I've made a right ruin of the plan, for here's a duke looking at me, and I don't rightly know how to be looked at. Gabriel, I've had too long a practice at the other thing." "Then we are neither of us fit for it," he said, "and may learn it together, badly, and be no worse matched for that." And he lifted one hand, slow, careful, and set it against her cheek. The width of his palm warm and rough and gentle, calloused from work no duke was supposed to do. And Nell, who had folded herself small at the edge of every room she had ever stood in, found that she leaned into it, without deciding to, the way the dog had leaned. The way a thing leans that has been holding itself up alone too long, and is suddenly, unbearably, offered somewhere to rest. "I love you," Gabriel Thorne said, low and plain, no speech in it at all. "I have known you the space of 2 days, and I love you, and I am aware that is madness, and I find I do not care, because the last time I let prudence and rank and a beautiful correct arrangement order my heart for me it cost me 3 years and my only brother, and I will not do it twice. Stay, not as a housemaid, and not on any week's trial. Stay because I am asking you to, and keep faith with me, and let me be the fool who says the thing first for once in this family." Nell put her hand up over his, holding it to her cheek. Her eyes had spilled over, and she let them, which she never did, which she had not done since the churchyard. "You daft great man," she said, unsteady, warm, kneeling in the straw for a dog, and now this. "Don't you know what I am? A thief's daughter, they'll say, that caught a duke with a dog trick, and half the county will believe it. And there's no, let them say it." He bent his head. "I have a whole life to make them wrong." "Say yes, Nell." "Yes," she said. "Aye, of course it's yes. It was yes in the yard. God help me, when you let the dog go on the strength of my face, I think I was lost from that minute and only too stubborn to own it." She laughed through the tears low. "Yes." And the Duke of Wolvercote kissed the quiet maid in the candlelight. Once, gently, with the whole warm summer night breathing in at the open windows, and it was closed door and chaste, and it was. Nell thought, with her hands fisted in the linen of his turned-back sleeves, the loudest thing that had ever happened to her in her life. They were married in the autumn, quietly, at St. Anselm's in the village beyond the beeches, when the hay was long in, and the first apples were down in the cellars, and the leaves had begun to go copper along the Bath Road. There was no crush of 23 guests. Gabriel had put them off with a courtesy that fooled nobody, and cared less. Julian gave her away, brown and filled out now, and easy in his skin. 3 months of his brother's cooking, and his brother's company having worn the road-worn look clean off him. Mrs. Pryor cried into her black bombazine and denied it roundly. Betsy caught the posy. Peter, who had picked up a stone of gossip that first night and kept it in his pocket, had found the stone grown too heavy to carry against a woman who was to be his mistress, and had put it down, and been, in the way of such men, rather relentlessly friendly ever since. And on the morning of it, before the bells, Gabriel put into Nell's hands a folded paper come down from Cranley, for he had written, as he wrote to everyone, scrupulous and unhurried and impossible to refuse, and had not stopped writing until it was done. It was a letter under the Earl of Cranley's own seal, and it set out, in the dry language of such things, that Thomas Cartwright, sometime in the family's employ, had been dismissed in error, that no imputation of dishonesty had ever been justly laid against him, that the matter of certain jewels had been fully and long since accounted for within the household, and that his character was hereby, though late, restored entire. One line of it Nell read aloud, standing in the still room in her wedding grey, with her hand not quite steady, and then could read no more. It is the wish of this family that the name of Cartwright be held henceforth without stain. Late, she said. 3 years too late for him to know it. He knows it, said Gabriel, and put his arm about her. Wherever the good ones go, they know when their name comes home. You told me that yourself, near enough, about the dog and the gate. I have decided to believe you about everything now. It saves a great deal of argument. She laughed, wet-eyed, and struck him lightly on the chest, and he caught her hand and held it there over the paper, and that was the whole of the mourning and the whole of the mending, done in a still room that smelled of drying lavender and apples and beeswax, on a bright autumn morning with the bells about to ring. A year on, and it was high summer again at Wolvercote. Nell came out into the stable yard in the last gold of a long July evening, and the cobbles were warm under her feet, and the honeysuckle was heavy on the wall exactly as it had been, and the doves were at their evening quarrel in the loft, and the whole yard smelled of warm dung, and split straw, and drying meadow hay off the long acre, and, faint and sweet under it all, of stocks from the border below the library. A wasp bumbled at the flowers. It was the hottest hour of the hottest day she could remember, and the whole world seemed to be holding still and golden, and she stood a moment on the very flagstone, where, a year gone, a grey girl 3 hours in the house had knelt down in front of everyone and made herself, forever, the one thing she had sworn never to be. She was not sorry for it any more. That was the thing she had learned. Being seen, by the right eyes, was not the end of safety. It was the start of it. Bran, she called. And the great grey wolfhound came, not off the wall like something loosed from a snare, not wild-eyed and white at the corners, but at an easy lolloping trot round the corner of the tack-room, with Julian ambling behind him, and a stick in his soft mouth, and his whole ruined trusting heart mended over and shining in his eyes. He came to her, and pushed his enormous rough skull into her skirts and leaned, and she laid one hand between his ears. One hand, the way she had that first blazing afternoon, and felt his heart going slow and sound and unafraid beneath the iron and ash coat. There, she said softly, as she had said it then, to the dog, to herself, to the whole golden settled evening. There now, I've got you. There's no need for any of it, and never was. He's got fat, Julian observed, coming up. You've the pair of them fat, Gabe and the dog both. It is a scandal what married contentment does to a fighting figure. I shall have to go away again, purely to keep my waist. You shall not go anywhere, said the Duke of Wolvercote, coming out through the archway hatless in his shirt-sleeves with the cuffs turned back, and the tiredness that had once lived about his mouth was clean gone now. Worn away by a year of being kept faith with, he crossed the yard without hurry, and put his arm about his wife, and the dog leaned against the both of them at once, greedy, refusing to choose, seeing no reason a body could not belong to more than one at a time. which was, Nell had always said, the sense the creatures had that people mostly hadn't. And the church bell at St. Anselm's began to tell the hour of 5 across the hot summer fields, exactly as it had that first afternoon, and the ordinary golden evening came flooding in around the three of them and the dog. The scythe far off in the long acre, the sweetness of the honeysuckle, the doves, the warm stone, the whole world holding still and full and safe. "What am I to do with you, Nell Cartwright?" Gabriel murmured against her hair, as he had asked it once before, in this yard, over a dog, when it had not been entirely a question about the dog. "Thorn," she corrected him, and turned her face up to the last of the light. "Nell Thorn. And you're to do nothing at all with me, your grace, but stand here in the gold a minute and let the bell finish, and be glad. We've the whole of the summer for the rest." So they stood, the quiet maid and the tamed duke, and the wolfhound who had knelt before her, in the warm gold of the yard where all of it began, and let the bell finish, and were glad. If you have ever been the quiet one at the edge of the room, the one nobody troubled to look at twice, and hoped that somewhere there was a soul who would see you clear and choose you anyway, then this was a story for you, and I am so glad you stayed by the fire with me to the end of it. If Nell and Gabriel and that great foolish loving dog warmed you tonight, tell me in the comments the moment your heart turned over. I read every one.